Oh, I need Audacity.
What'd you say?
Audacity.
Yeah. Let me know when it's up and I'll count down.
Where is it? Normally my computer will tell me like, oh, this is what you typically open at this time.
Oh, yeah.
All right. It is up.
All right. Audacity in 3, 2, 1.
Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Christina Lynn, and I'm here with my co-host, Marissa Roy. And in today's episode, we are celebrating 2 freaking years.
Woo!
Woo-hoo!
I didn't want to yell too loud. I'm going to do it far away from the mic. Woo!
Yeah, I wish we could have like confetti pop and maybe our producer will be able to throw something fun in.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if we could do like sound effects.
Yeah, I don't know. We're not like that advanced at our 2-year mark.
But yeah, it's our anniversary. It's been officially 104 episodes, which means it's been officially 104 weeks, which is 2 years, 52 times 2. So I think it'll come out like, because we launched the first day or week of December in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be curious if like the days line up. I know it like every year the same day goes back like one date, but yeah, this is a pretty cool milestone. And also just pretty wild. Like we'll talk about this obviously, but how much things have changed since we have started the podcast. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, literally to get pregnant and then have a kid within that time frame is wild for you to like gotten married and got engaged and then married. Lots of milestones. And move. Can't forget that.
And moved. And
Buy
it's
a
just really
house.
cool because there's people who listen to this who've been like with us through that whole journey and through all the life updates. And it's so cool.
Yeah, it is really fun. And just also just to see how like the podcast has progressed over time from where we started to where we are now.
Yeah.
But we'll save our sappiness for the later part of the episode. So I think that first we'll kind of talk about the fun stuff and the goodies. So just like we did last year, our last anniversary, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to do a giveaway for you guys. Because again, like we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. And so we want to give our appreciation. So if you want to talk about what that will look like.
Sure. So I want to also say selfishly, I have my 2022 goals next to me at all times. And one of them on this piece of paper is 40,000 podcast plays by the end of 2022. And we are at 33,495 right now. So we need about 6,500 more plays. Now, normally with our average listens per episode, I don't think we'll get there, but with you guys' help, we might be able to get there, because what I feel like tends to happen whenever somebody gets turned on to our podcast is they start binge listening. And like, this is a very normal occurrence because I've talked to so many people that I've sent like one episode and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to listen to like 20 more. And we don't have like a huge audience size compared to how many plays we have. So it just shows that like the people that listen, like they go hard and they go deep. And so what you guys can do to like help me check this box off by the end of 2022 for my goal of 40,000 is going to be fed into by this giveaway as well. So what we would ask you to do is drop a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, screenshot it and send it to us. And if you could share the podcast on any of your social media platforms or share it with friends individually, but if you do share it on your social media platforms and you tag us, we will count that as an additional entry into the giveaway. So rating and review is one entry, and sharing on your social media platforms is another entry. And we will be drawing for Barbell Lifestyle Podcast apparel and a $100 gift card to the Nutrition Corners for some supplements, nutritional supplements, proteins, multivitamins, all the fun things, and an Amazon gift card. Apparently, yes.
Yes.
Christina like typed it in on top of that. So we'll also do an Amazon gift card drawing as well. So there's going to be some great prizes, and we just want to give back to you for continuing to help us grow this show, grow our mission, and obviously it helps indirectly grow our businesses as well. And those are kind of our livelihoods, so we're pretty grateful.
Yeah, and I think that last year we picked 2 giveaway winners, so I think we'll do the exact same thing, especially since it's our 2-year anniversary.
Yeah, we'll do that again. Sweet. So just to recap, $100 Nutrition Corners gift card, an Amazon gift card drawing, a Barbell Lifestyle apparel piece for each of the winners. Leave a rating and review on the podcast. Now, if you've already done that, then you will need to definitely share the podcast to get an entry in on your social media platforms, but you can get double entries by doing both. So make sure to tag us on Instagram, Christy Lynn Fit and Marissa Roy Fitness. All of that is in the description. And that's the episode.
Sort of.
I'm just kidding. It just sounded like the outro.
Yeah, exactly. So what we wanted to kind of talk about today is not necessarily any topic in particular, but just spending some time to reflect. So I really love the end of the year for that reason, because I think, and we've talked about this actually on the episode with Emily Hayden, is like not a lot of people spend time to really reflect and think on some things. And so I love just kind of getting into that mindset. And I feel like that always happens at the end of the year. So I'm excited to kind of talk about that and like our, just reflecting on like the mission of the podcast, our favorite episodes, and maybe even least favorite episodes. When I saw that on there, I was like, ooh, I don't know if we want to talk about that, but I think that we can.
Yeah. I mean, it's our show. So
yeah.
I don't think our least favorite episode is going to end up being an interview. So
no, unless it's with Eric Helms, in which case, no, just kidding.
Yeah. But yeah, I just kind of like threw together some like prompts for us to like reflect on. And the whole mission of this podcast in the first place was to spread knowledge and education about living a healthy lifestyle in a way that is not restrictive, that's not extreme. And the more time I spend in this industry, the more I realize like how abnormal a show like this is, and how messages like this are. Because while we, like Christina and I, live in a bubble of fitness coaches that are trying to do things the right way, there's that many more coaches, quote unquote, and gurus and shitty people out there that are preaching kind of, all the crazy things. And I still run into women on the daily that are struggling with fad diets and just the all or nothing mindset, and just literally all of the things that, lead to a really negative relationship with yourself and food. And so as I've been kind of in the weeds talking to more women lately, it's just been a really big reminder of how important this show is. Like I've sent out a lot of episodes, and the feedback that I've been getting is actually pretty wild from these women, because they're like mind blown at some of these concepts when it's like the back of our hand to us. But we tend to take that for granted.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just really cool every single week when we drop a new episode to have clients in my inbox with check-ins be like, oh my gosh, I love the new episode and this resonated with me. And I feel like it's like we pick the topics at random, or we're thinking about maybe specific, certain clients and wanting to bring attention to that. But then it's like everyone else, I feel like it's just so relatable, and they're like, this could not have come at a more perfect time. So it is really, really awesome to hear that and know that what we're talking about is helping, again, whether you are a client or not of ours, like that is the goal for this podcast, is to be able to help in any way that we can.
Yeah. I totally agree. And oh man, it's just good to know that like we can make an impact on some people without them having to pay us money. And like I've heard of people who like charge money for their consults, like for like free consultation calls to just like learn about a program, which I think that's kind of ridiculous. It's like asking to charge for a podcast. Like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah. So anyways, we like helping you for free and we're glad that you're here. So let's get into the fun stuff. What's your favorite episode that we've recorded? I know we tried to answer this on the Q&A episode recently, but I don't know if you've given it any more thought.
I still really, really love the episode that we did recently with Cody. Like
Yeah.
I think just because it just rings true, and I feel like regardless, we can talk about intermittent fasting, and that's obviously not a dig at anyone, but like, I'm just saying we can talk about like different methods and like reverse dieting and like macros 101, like macros 101 I love because it's like a foundation episode, and it is so helpful. But I feel like just at the end of the day, like whatever you're doing, you need to enjoy the journey. Like, and so I just think that just rings true. And I feel like maybe almost like takes the podcast episodes and like puts everything into a little box with a ribbon and like ties it around, like enjoy the journey. Like don't focus
Yeah.
on the outcome. So I think that I'm still going to keep that as my favorite episode.
That's a good point. That's a good point. I don't know if I can really disagree because I'm scrolling through and looking at all of our other episodes. And you're right, like everything else that we have done interviews on and talked about in those contexts, like with special guests, has been more like direct towards a specific topic versus like that being kind of all encompassing. However, I do think that two interviews that have, I think at the time that this comes out, two episodes that have yet to come out at this point when you're listening to this are also really well-rounded with Lauren and Emily with
Absolutely.
mindset and kind of what we've been, really just trying to dig into with like our content and our coaching lately. So I think those are really pertinent as well. The only other thing I will say is like, I do just have a soft spot for our first interview ever with Nick McAmelly about injury reduction and pain management, because like, regardless of the fact that episode was 90 fucking minutes, 95 minutes. But at the same time, I have a soft spot for that episode because I have obviously struggled a lot with back pain and all the different ailments and aches and injuries, and have felt super broken, have had to build back up from my injuries over and over again for a while. So that episode really stuck with me because when I found out who Nick was, before we even asked him to come onto the show, I was like in the midst of like all of my back pain, like the worst that it had ever been. It stopped me from playing volleyball. I could barely train without like having my back seize up. And I found Nick and his podcasts on other shows about this topic at that time. And that is what brought me out of being perpetually injured. And so being able to interview him for our first interview on the show is definitely a soft spot of mine.
Yeah. And then on top of that, to have done the interview and him afterwards be like, that was a great interview. And we were like, oh my gosh, good.
Yeah. And he had so much fun. And we were like, are you just saying that? Like, are you just trying to be nice?
No. And then he came back on. So
yeah, it was great. But I do agree about Cody because I do look up to him a lot. And I think that episode 101, if you're listening to this, go back 3 episodes and go listen to it.
And then the injury reduction was number 7.
Yes, the injury reduction was number 7. So you're going to have to do some scrolling, but it is worth it.
It'll get our ratings or not the ratings, but the views up or the plays.
Yeah.
I will argue too. I know that number 9, our first ever Q&A, which was very long, but it was fun doing that with you in person because I think that's our only in-person like podcast that we've done together.
It must be, isn't it? Oh my gosh. Because then the next time I came around to town, we just didn't do it. We didn't have time, right?
Yeah. I forget why. Or maybe you didn't come last year, right?
I don't remember. I thought maybe there was another trip, but either way, like
I don't know.
Every other time we've been together, we haven't like made the time to do it.
Yeah. So that'd be fun to just like sit across from you and like do the podcast.
I know I gotta like set up like a studio here, like an actual situation where I could do that and like have
Yeah.
couches and like have like a sit down area for it. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah.
All
What was your
right.
least favorite episode and why?
So I scrolled back and I'm looking at all the episodes. I had to scroll back and look at the very beginning because I feel like we were not very good and very efficient with how we kind of conducted ourselves. So I don't know if number 4, so you want to compete. That's the one I go to because it's just, I mean, it's almost 2 hours.
Yeah.
So I feel like we probably could have condensed it, but I was also like, I had literally just competed. So
Yeah.
I think it was really like at the forefront of my mind, and I, had prep brain. And so that one, I guess, and it's so frustrating because it's like, I think it's a good episode and it's very, very encompassing, but
Yeah.
almost like too encompassing maybe.
Yeah, I just felt like it maybe could have been like 2 parts if we knew better at the time. I
Yeah.
remember like, and this is really funny, but like our editor, Shane, who he edits all these episodes and just cuts out all our bullshit, basically. When we first started the podcast, I remember him making some kind of comments about how freaking long our episodes were. And he was like, you guys should work on getting this length down. Like, not just for my sake, but like your audience is not going to listen to this.
Yeah. And we're like, oh, cool.
We were like, yeah, I don't believe you. And like now we're finally just bringing our episodes down to like 30, 40 minutes.
Yeah. And we were like high-fiving ourselves when we can get it under an hour.
I know, but we just like to talk.
Yeah, which is ironic. I'm looking back at our time management 101, and that's an hour 30.
God. Yeah, we didn't manage our time well to record that.
Yeah. So I would say that is probably my least favorite just because of how long it is, and probably we could have done a better job at condensing it. But we were, early on. And so I think it's really cool though that we're able to reflect back and like talk about that. And then shoot, I will say the other episode that I really love, I know I'm jumping back, but I forgot about this, was the Christina and Marissa life updates. So that was really exciting because I got to come on and announce my pregnancy. So I will say that. So that was really fun too. But yeah, so least favorite was probably the do you want to compete, which is really tough because it's our only aspect or our only episode that we've talked about competing, and it is so near and dear to my heart. But it's just how we structured it.
Yeah. And it's hard to answer this question because it's like what are we judging least favorite off of? Like our delivery, like
right,
the length, like not enjoying talking about the topic. Like I was just trying to remember like maybe an episode that I just like didn't enjoy like being there because I just wasn't in the mood or something, but I can't really like think of it that way. I was gonna say you have an out though, Christina. Any of your least favorite could just be my mini series ones because you weren't there.
yeah, that's true.
You could just say those are your least favorite.
But then it's also nice because I didn't have to do a podcast.
Yeah, that's true.
Not that I don't enjoy being here, but with Colton sometimes, it is tough.
Yeah. I think like maybe my least favorite maybe is the one where we talked about like how to start an online business. And I think I will say that's my least favorite in terms of delivery and how, and I haven't gone back and listened to it in a very long time, but at least from what I remember, I just feel like there's things that I would definitely just change about how to approach that in terms of like, I think there were a lot of details that we talked about that would like overwhelm somebody from starting. And like, we were like, yeah, LLC and legal shit, and you should have contracts and blah, blah, blah. When really it should be about like, how do you start making impacts on people's lives? And then if you start doing that, then like the rest will figure itself out. Cause that's how it happened for us. Like we just kind of like bootleg started like taking Venmo payments and making Excel sheets for people. And then it just kind of, organized itself out to where we are now with legitimate actual businesses where we have to, file our shit to the IRS.
Which freaking sucks, but
yeah.
it's like, you have your own business, but then it's like, oh, okay, so like 50% of that just goes out the door, and then another percentage of that goes to taxes. So you're like, well, I'm really not left with a whole lot.
Yeah.
I was gonna look at the different episode rankings because I thought this would be really interesting from like an audience kind of perspective.
Like
So
worst episode.
yeah, so our top episode is number 38, which is body recomposition with Chris Bearcat, which is it's at 925, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
And so he's blown Eric Helms out of the water. But that would be so number 38, and then our second episode is the number 14, which is myth busting and the muscle and strength pyramid. But I don't know if I guess it technically does rank the least listened to.
Yeah. Well, like I'm
But
looking at it now, and a lot of the least listened to are the most recent. So everything
right.
from 94 to 102 is down there, but that's just because it's newer.
So I'd
But
say 12.
12.
Yeah.
Which is finding a great coach, because if you're listening to this podcast, then clearly you've already found great coaches. So you don't need that episode, right? That's how it works.
Yes. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. I'm wondering, like, if I take a look at all of these, like burnout was a big one. People really like the burnout episodes.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of them are kind of like our first ones, which is really interesting, like the healthy habits, Q&A, but yeah, so I guess according to the people, finding a great coach, they are like, I have found great coaches.
Well, we got to give it to actually Dr. Eric Helms. Even though he's not the number 1 episode, he has the number 2 episode, but he also has the most recent episode in the top 10, number 90, Why Your Diet Fails, Refeeds and Diet Breaks. All the other episodes that are up near the top have been out for like at least a year. So that says something.
Yeah, and the fact that he's got 2 top 10s.
Yeah. So just,
Eric's actually 11. It's number 11.
Oh, I didn't count. It just looked like it was the top 10.
Yeah, but what about moving on to most memorable interview?
Well, I kind of like put these into subcategories because I was like, what is memorable even? Like that's just like favorite, right? Again.
Yeah.
So I split it up into interview that I was most nervous for, and then like an interview that I was the most surprised by. And so nervous for, I mean, honestly, I've been really nervous for a lot of our interviews. And like you can tell when I'm nervous when I accidentally start like fangirling at the beginning of the intro, where I'm like, we've been following you forever, and like we love your stuff, and it's been awesome, and just being a freaking geek. Let's see. I think the interview, I will say the easiest one to answer that I was most surprised by was all about menopause with Amanda Thebe. Surprised by not only like the just relevance of the episode for audience members, because I've given that episode to a lot of women in their 40s and 50s, and they freaking eat that shit up. Like they love it. And they're like, wow, this is the best thing I've ever listened to ever, because it's basically, it's empowering them and telling them that they're not doomed for life. Right. And in terms of just like how well the conversation flowed with not knowing her at all. Like this was literally like, I had some clients who wanted an episode on menopause, and I was like, I don't really know an expert. Let me Google one. And so I did some research and tried to weed out between, all the BS that's out there, and found like the most reliable name that I could. But I didn't know her. I didn't know if she was going to respond. I didn't know if she, was even going to make it to our meeting, but she showed up, and it was a great conversation. So I have to say I was most surprised by that one.
Gosh, most surprised. I don't know, maybe Eric Helms, just because kind of like what you were saying, like fangirling, and the fact that we were able to have him on, and not only that, but have him on for episode number 14, right? And then just how like funny and chill and relaxed he was. It was
Yeah.
just, I don't know, it was like almost like just chatting with a friend and like making all like cracking all these jokes. And I was like, and it's so funny because I was just like, wow, he's just like a human.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, of course. But so that was kind of surprising. But yeah, I mean, I've loved every episode that we've done with him.
Yeah. I will say most nervous or like maybe just like most like unsettled the whole time was probably Dr. Eric Trexler, metabolic adaptation, because you know how he has that face, and he told us about it too. The face that looks like he's about to say something when he's not. And so like the whole freaking time on this interview, I'm like, he looks like he's about to talk. Like, do I need to stop talking? And then I was so focused on like whether or not he wanted to talk that I would forget my train of thought. And then we would just be in this awkward situation. Like, I don't think you can actually hear, like, see any of that if you listened. But that's what was going through my head during that interview. But it was a very good interview. But I think I was definitely just the most in my head for that one, because I'm constantly trying to like read people's body language and cueing, like time things
Yeah.
up appropriately. And like, it was hard with him, man.
I will say the episode and the interview I was most nervous for was Doug.
More?
And yes, so I had like kind of just started working with Core at the time. And on top of that, we talk about my house is chaotic, which like I've got two cats, I have a dog, I have a baby now, my husband's running around the house too. And like I never know like what my house situation is going to be like. And my mom was here, and I can't remember if Colton was born yet or if I was pregnant or
For
like
Doug
what
Miller?
was going. Yeah.
Oh no, you were not pregnant. That
Okay.
was episode
Yeah. Because I just started working with Core.
17.
So
Yeah.
my mom was here, and we were running we were running Bob. Bob is the name of our vacuum cleaner.
Oh,
Our
I remember that
yeah,
now.
our Roomba. And we had this giant picture frame that was just like leaning up, which, yeah, okay, yeah. So Colton was not running around. He was not born because we wouldn't just leave a giant picture just like leaning up against the wall. But our Roomba, like 2 minutes, like a minute before I'm supposed to hop on for this interview with Doug, the Roomba slams into the painting, shatters the glass. It goes everywhere. And I'm like, oh my God. So I'm trying to get like everyone out, like trying to clean it up. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be on for the interview. And then I felt so bad that I was late. So the entire time I was just like so frazzled. And like all I could think about was like, I just made the worst impression possible. So I was very nervous for that one.
Yeah, I've always like never really been able to read Doug, and like I worked part-time for his company for over 4 years, and like I've never gotten a read on him, and I've always been like, do you actually like me? Like, are we on good terms? So like I will say I was pretty nervous for that one too. Just because like again, like some people you just can't get a read on, and like, you know.
Yeah, I felt so bad. So that was I think will continue to be number one for me forever.
That's fair. That's
Yeah.
fair.
So I think that like kind of is a good transition, which we
It is
talk.
though. It is this time.
So just like the behind the scenes and the craziness that goes on, like when we're off screen. And so when we first started the podcast, like we were just trying to like feel each other out and like get into a good rhythm and get into a good cadence with things. And we had a pen trick. And I can't remember how we even came up with this. Do
Like,
you
why
remember?
not? Like in hindsight's always 2020, but like, why not just fucking mute and unmute when you want to talk? Like, I don't know. But we were basically like, hey, so we're both going to be holding pens because we're taking notes and like, writing stuff down as we go. But if we want to start talking, like, we'll just put the pen up in the corner of the screen.
Yeah.
And like, if the pen's up, it means we need to say something.
Yeah, but
It did not work.
No, I mean, because then like you're having to like look at the other person and make sure like, oh my God, is their pen up or are they just taking notes? Like rather than just letting things flow more naturally. But I think that we've gotten hopefully a little bit better with that.
Yeah. I mean, like, I literally, at this point, if I'm talking for a while, I can see when your face changes and you're ready to say something.
Yeah.
And then I'll be like, I have to make a decision here. I'm going to completely finish my thought or I'm going to stop
And
and
then potentially lose it.
potentially lose it. But like, at least like at this point, like I know when you are about to say something.
Yeah, I think that and we've just gotten better at the cadence and knowing like, okay, they I don't know, probably want to wrap it up or move on, or they probably have something to add.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just a feeling, which is funny though, because it's over Zoom. It's like, it's crazy that you can like read non-verbally so much through there. But yeah, I think it's just reps, just practice like anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And like usually when I like start losing like momentum and I'm talking and I'm like, all right, I have no idea where to go next. Usually if I just stop talking, like you have something to say. And I'm like, all right, great. We'll
Yeah.
go from there. And then we give each other ideas. I will say solo episodes are pretty difficult at times because, and that's why I don't do a lot of them. I just kind of like throw them in here and there. But like not having someone to bounce off of is very different, like very different.
Yeah. Or like you mentioned, like if you do lose your train of thought or you're stumbling or whatever it might be, like to have someone who can, like you said, just pick it up or you can build off the other person. And I feel like there's so many times we'll have written an episode outline and we think like, oh, okay, this is pretty like all encompassing. Like these are the really important parts. And then we start talking and we're like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe we didn't put that on the outline.
Yeah. And that's why our first 20 episodes were 2 hours long.
Yes. Yep. So we now know that we need to reel ourselves in when we get too far off topic.
We used to, do you remember what our old outlines used to look like though? Remember how we would go like point
Detailed.
by point by point? And honestly, I'm so glad we don't do that anymore because could you imagine? Because what we would do is we would go point by point and then we would expand on some of those. And then at the end, we would like summarize the points and we would be, we would spend like an extra probably 15 minutes of just like recapping everything we talked about. And then we'd be like an hour and a half in. Poor Shane. But now like literally all we do, if you want to know some behind the scenes, is we'll literally like for interviews, we'll put like maybe 5 to 8 questions down. And then for like our duo episodes, at this point, I'm kind of like, all right, what are we talking about? And then I'll kind of put like introduce topic, elaborate pros and cons, like
Give context.
yeah, like if I look at these, they're just way shorter. Like making eat dessert to every day to lose more fat, episode 103. My outline is struggling with the holiday season, Halloween candy, dessert every day, Matrix, plug 2 download. That was it.
Yeah.
Or like our last one together was like 6 bullet points, and 2 of those bullet points are 2 words.
Yeah. So I equate that kind of to when I was a school counselor or when I was in training and going through school, like I would give lessons to kids and I was so incredibly nervous to get in front of a group of students and like have like it had to be the most perfect lesson plan
Yeah.
and like all these activities and all the things. And then I remember getting to the point where I was like, ah, crap, like I've got a lesson and I've got nothing to talk about. And I'll be like, oh, I'll just wing it. And just like come up with something, but just feeling comfortable enough, like, oh, I know how to control a class. Like I know what generally we need to talk about and like coming up with, some fun things, but I don't need to have this like perfect lesson plan or like, a perfect outline and just kind of feeling comfortable with like, yeah, I know that like we'll talk about something important and we'll bounce off of each other and like we'll get a good episode out of it.
Yeah, pretty much. I felt the same way with like any kind of like presentation or like live Zoom presentation, or like even like I have a couple like speaking gigs coming up in January, and like I have them planned, but I don't, you know what I mean? Like there's slides to a slideshow, but like there's no play-by-play notes, because I'm just gonna go. Because at this point it's like you either know this stuff at like the back of your hand or you don't. And like we have talked about this in so much depth, and it's just almost better to not like overthink it.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think you can get too much into your head and then we go down a rabbit hole. And so I think that there are certain topics though where we will do just, I don't know if we want to necessarily call it research, but just making sure that we're a little bit prepared and like brushed up on and stuff. But we just don't prepare the same way that we did previously.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, so that's where we were. That's where we are now. It's just crazy. Like 2 years flew by, 104 episodes flew by, which is wild. But I mean, I guess we want to know what you guys want to see from us as well, or I guess hear from us as well, on this show, because at this point it is kind of hard to come up with new podcast topics, and like we could very well like redo a bunch of episodes. And sometimes we like there's definitely overlap. I mean, with every episode there's overlap to things that we've talked about before, but I guess I'm curious, like with our current audience, whoever's here, like what do you guys want to learn about? Like if you could send us a message or something like that, that would be awesome, because we're constantly trying to think of new ideas and inspiration for new episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk about, like we come up with these topics based off of what we hear from client check-ins or questions that we're getting in the DMs and things like that. But having our listeners, those who are here all the time, give us what they want to listen to, like that is the most helpful. And especially since we're here to give you guys those resources and education, that would be the best for us.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So anything else? Are we done reflecting?
I am reflected out.
Perfect. So yeah, so we would really appreciate you guys entering the giveaway. So again, it's just an opportunity for us to give back to you and say thank you for listening to us. And we really, really do appreciate it. So we hope that you enjoyed this fun little reflection episode. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the podcast, and you can find both of us on Instagram, like Marissa mentioned earlier. You can find me at Christina Fit. Marissa is at Marissa Roy Fitness. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you back next week.